Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play. There can be a lot of funny stories surrounding sports, like this one. There was a couple that went to a football game one time, and they had been dating a while, boyfriend and girlfriend, and the guy was really into the game. The girlfriend not so much, and to be honest, she was just wondering, when is this guy finally going to propose? Well, the game went on, and at one point in the game, a substitute ran onto the field. And the boyfriend, he said to his girlfriend, "Now look, I want you to look at that substitute, because next year, he's going to be our best man." Well, the girlfriend looked over at him and said, "Well, that certainly is a strange proposal, but I accept." Sometimes sports are funny, but sometimes they can be serious too. And oftentimes you'll hear about people who went through sports in high school, college, and so forth, who had a wonderful experience with their coach, because their coach was there to help them in their life, to mentor them, or at the very least, to get the very best out of them on the field. So a lot of the things that coaches will tell players are actually things we can apply to other areas of life, and certainly to our spiritual lives. So I want to share with you today a few things that some of the great coaches in football have said to their players, and take those things and apply them to our life with God. You know, the scriptures say in Proverbs chapter 27, verse 17, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." Coaches are meant to sharpen their players, and today let's look at how they might sharpen us if we apply what they say to their players to our lives with God. I want to take a look at three of what are regarded as three of the great coaches of all time, and take a look at one thing they said that stands out, something that they repeated over and over to their players, because they wanted to get the best out of their players. And if we take each one of these three things, we can get the best out of us when it comes to following God. The first coach we'll look at is a man named Vince Lombardi. Vince Lombardi was the great coach of the Green Bay Packers in their early days, the team that won the first Super Bowl and went on to greatness and historical greatness. The Super Bowl trophy is named after Coach Vince Lombardi. One day, the coach was famous for saying to his players that we need to get back to basics. He would always say to his players, if we don't do the basics right, then we're not going to get anything right. So he famously said one day in a locker room, "We're getting back to the basics." He held up a football and he said, "This is a football." So he was going back to the absolute basics. And what he meant was, if we learn how to tackle better, if we learn how to block better, then we're going to be the great team that we need to be. It comes back to not skipping over, not forgetting the very basic things of football. Well, that's the same thing for our Christian life. Oftentimes, we're just forgetting the basics. So let's take a look at two basics in the Christian life. One basic is, the scriptures say in Matthew 22:37, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind." That is the foundation of everything else. So, a lot of our questions can be answered if we go back to that basic. If we're wondering, what should we do on a daily basis? Should we do this or not do that? Should we date this person or not that person? What about this decision versus that decision? Well, let's go back to the basic. You can always ask yourself, are you loving the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul and your mind, with that choice, with that decision? That's the basic. Everything ought to go back to, is this really a decision I'm making out of love for God with my entire being? And if we can say yes, then we're on the right track to make the right decisions. But let's face it, isn't it true that often throughout a day, we make decisions and we do things that sometimes nobody else knows about, or we allow certain thoughts to run rampant in our mind that is not at all in agreement with loving the Lord our God with all of our heart, with all of our soul, and all of our mind. And so if we get back to the basic, like a football player could get back to the basic of the techniques of good tackle, get back to the basic of the right techniques for blocking, as a believer, if we can get back to the basics of loving the Lord our God with all of our heart, mind, and soul, then we're going to be making much better decisions and having a much better spiritual life with God, all because we go back to the basics. Here's another way we can apply the principle of Vince Lombardi in getting back to the basics. Some of the basics that are meant to be part of a Christian lifestyle are reading the Bible on a regular basis, praying often. Are we back to those basics? How about having fellowship with other believers? Do we have these basics in our life? In Joshua chapter 1, verse 8, we read these words, "This book of instruction must not depart from your mouth, but you are to meditate on it day and night, so that you will be careful to do everything that is written in it." Have we forgotten the basics of being in the Word of God, letting it feed us, letting it change our morning and then change our whole day? Are we ending our day in the Word? This is a basic that can change your Christian life. Vince Lombardi was right. If we get back to the basics, then we're going to be a good football team. And that principle is true for Christians. If we get back to the basics, we could have a wonderful Christian life. Here's another famous coach with great advice. His name was Bear Bryant. Decades ago, Bear Bryant was the coach of the University of Alabama. And he said that one of the things that he would repeatedly say to his players was this. He would say, if anything goes bad, then you are to say, I did it. If anything goes semi-good, then you are to say, we did it. And if anything goes real good, then you are to say, you did it. And he said that he would take this and he would say it to his players over and over, and he said, that's all it takes to get people to win football games for you. Interesting. Well, let's pick up on that. Why was that so significant? In fact, why would Bear Bryant say that those words is all it takes to get people to win football games for you? Well, let's take the statement and what he was getting after. What he was getting after was personal responsibility. So take that first statement. If anything goes bad, then I did it. Personal responsibility. Don't blame what may go wrong on other people. Interesting. He said, if you could take that out, blaming other people, and add in personal responsibility, you're going to win football games. Wow. Same thing for the Christian life. If what we do in life is blame other people for the character flaws that we ourselves have, if we blame other people for the outcome of our life, then we're doing the very thing that Bear Bryant said would lose football games. We want to be people who take personal accountability and responsibility for our lives, for our decisions, and for the outcome of our lives. That's often not what we do. Instead, we blame, we justify, or we complain, but we don't take personal responsibility for what we've done. It seems to go hand in hand with being sinful. We want desperately to justify. We want desperately to take the responsibility off of us. And if you're in the practice of blaming or justifying, you can blame and justify away just about anything if you want to. The key is to say, if something goes wrong, then I did it. If something is that I've done is not right, then it is my responsibility. It is my fault. We see this from the very beginning in the account of Adam and Eve. You remember that after the fall of Adam and Eve, both Adam and Eve, who were directly to blame for what happened, blamed it on someone or something else. After the fall, God said to Adam, "What did you do?" Here's Adam's words in reply in Genesis chapter 3, verse 12. He said, "The woman you gave to me, you gave to be with me. She gave me some fruit from the tree of life, and I ate it." Whose fault was it, according to Adam? The woman. And that is in direct opposition to what would be a winning spiritual life, or direct opposition to what would win football games. And then the same thing happened when God went to Eve, and Eve said these words in verse 13, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." Whose fault was it? The serpent. So the process of blaming, the process of not taking personal responsibility will lead to terrible results in your spiritual life. And in contrast, taking personal responsibility for the decisions you're making and the actions you're taking will lead to great success in your spiritual life. It's the same thing that Bear Bryant was saying to his players all those years. Take personal responsibility for the outcome of what you've got to do on the field. And he said, again, his words, that's all it takes to get people to win football games. And now, let's take a coach from the modern era. Coach Bill Belichick of the New England Patriots. Patriots have won more Super Bowls than any other team, and Bill Belichick, along with Vince Lombardi and Bear Bryant, is regarded as one of the great coaches of all time in all of sport. So here's a phrase that he would say over and over to his players. Whatever their position was, it would be the same thing, and it would just be three words that he felt really was one of the keys to success. He would go up to the player, might be a linebacker, place kicker, quarterback, lineman, whatever, and he would say to them, "Do your job. Do your job. Whatever job you've got, do that job, and do it with all that you've got, but be absolutely certain that your part in all of this is being played out well by you." Now, take that into the spiritual lives, our spiritual lives, and think about this fact that God has given you a job. You have a calling. It's different for every person, but what's the same is we've all got one. You've got a calling, I've got a calling. It's different though. You've got different spiritual gifts than I do, but you've got certain spiritual gifts. If we apply this, we could say to ourselves, wow, I've got to do my job. I've got to fulfill my calling. I've got to use my gifts. What an amazing place this world would be if every believer said that I'm going to do my job. I'm going to fulfill my calling. I'm going to apply my spiritual gifts. I suspect to you that if we all said that, it would be very powerful to be around other believers. So the scriptures say that. In fact, Paul instructed Timothy. Paul was a coach, a mentor to Timothy. And he said these words to Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 1. He said, "Fan into flame the gift that is in you." Fan into flame the gift that is in you. What's that expression mean, fan into flame? Well, many of you have made lots of campfires, and you know that the campfire sometimes just a little ember, some sparks, and if you give it some oxygen by fanning, fire loves oxygen, then you fan what's little there into flame. And so Paul is saying to Timothy, fan into flame the gift that's within you. Oh, wait a minute. It's the same words of Bill Belichick, which was do your job, fulfill your calling, use your gift, make sure you're using your gifts, make sure you're fulfilling your calling. Great advice on the field, great advice for our spiritual lives. And you know, when you minister to other people, when you fulfill your calling, when you use your gifts, you're not only going to bless other people, you're going to bless yourself. The teacher learns even more than the student. The giver is more blessed than the person they give to. The person using their gifts, fulfilling their calling, will be even more blessed than the people they're blessing. It is for you and it is for others that we do our job, fulfill our calling, and use our gifts. So there is great advice from three of the greatest, most successful football coaches of all time. Let that be iron that sharpens iron. Take this advice, because when they gave it, they got the best out of their players. And when they gave this advice, each one of them, they won games over and over, year in and year out. Believer and friend, if you want to live a spiritual life that's successful, where you win over and over again, and where the best of you is drawn out, then you be someone who takes all of this advice to heart. Take Vince Lombardi's advice to heart and get back to the basics of spiritual living. Take Bear Bryant's advice to heart and take personal responsibility for what you do, think, and say. And take Coach Bill Belichick's advice to heart. Fulfill your calling, do your job, use your gifts. That is a winning combination. It is winning advice. It is iron sharpening iron. Take it all to heart and have a winning spiritual life. Thank you for being with us today for this midweek devotional, and I hope you're joining us for all of the top 50 questions we're examining every week also. So glad you're on this spiritual journey with me, and so glad that you are looking to know what God is saying, what God is desiring, and what God is wanting from your life, and what is in the Word of God. If you've been blessed today, hit the subscribe button, the like button, and share it as well. Continue to be part of our wonderful Top 50 community and help others to know about it as well. And remember, for every question, there's always an answer.